I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar. So this is the first ever webinar series on scaling up with automation, a guide to small manufacturers, which consists of 3 insightful episodes. We explore the compelling need for automation in today's manufacturing landscape, guide you in identifying your first automation project, and help you build the advanced manufacturing team necessary for success. Whether you're a small business just starting out or you're looking to enhance your current automation endeavors, this series is your key to thriving in the dynamic world of modern manufacturing. If you have not seen episode 1 and 2, they are available on demand on our website at vention.io/webinars. The first episode, Market Pressure and the Need for Automation, aired on January 25th with Joe Wykes, our CRO at Vention, and Juan Martinez, the VP of Manufacturing Growth from Spectre & Co. The second episode covered how to identify your automation project, aired last week with Mathieu Desmarais, VP of Application Engineering at Vention, and Kurt Gunnell, Manufacturing Engineer at Borns Inc. On today's episode, we welcome Brandon Bond, Senior Project Engineer at Actemium, to cover the topic of building your advanced manufacturing team. So with the agenda today, I'll be hosting it. So my name is Jeremy. I'll be going through the speaker presentation, so who will be actually presenting today, and then we'll be moving on to a short piece by Etienne, and finally the conversation between Etienne and Brandon Bond. At the end, there will be a Q&A period, so if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to ask those, and we will get to them at the end. As for our 2 speakers today, we have Etienne Lacroix as well as Brandon Bond here with us. So Etienne Lacroix is the founder and CEO of Vention. And just a little bit of background on 2 of them. So for Etienne, from the young age of 11, Etienne was building full-size prototype planes in his own backyard. And it became very evident early on that his trajectory would direct him towards the realm of engineering. Following his academic pursuits in the field, he started his professional career joining the ranks at GE. There, he contributed significantly to product development for plants spanning Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Pursuing his passion for product development and integrating his experience at GE, Etienne saw an opportunity to make industrial automation accessible for all manufacturers, which led him to found Vention in 2016, growing the company to over 300 employees, serving over 4,000 manufacturers today. As for Brandon, Brandon is a senior project engineer at Actemium USA, Indianapolis, where he is a mechanical engineer with over 10 years experience. Specializing in industrial automation, he excels in CAD modeling, PLCs, and robotics for process automation. Brandon's career highlights include roles at the Toro Company and Continental, showcasing his expertise in overhauling control systems, developing automated algorithms, and leading automation upgrades. Passionate about lean principles, Brandon focuses on combining smart sensing with robotics to enhance manufacturing efficiency. His commitment to continuous improvement is evident in his track record of successful project implementations. I'll now pass the mic to Etienne to cover a little bit more about the topic today and can introduce themselves after.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks everybody for being here. I'm quite excited to be doing this last episode in our series with Brandon Bond. Brandon and I got to know each other throughout the journey at Vention, and I've been able to experience firsthand the type of work he's actually driving on manufacturing floor. So I'm quite excited about the discussion we're about to have. I want to put down on the table 2 definitions we like to use at Vention before we get started and we bring Brandon on stage with us. The first one is, what is DIY automation and do-it-yourself automation? And this is a trend that we've experienced, more and more in the entry-level automation. And it's really this act where professionals that are already at the manufacturers are taking on industrial automation project using mostly plug-and-play hardware. And it's because of the democratization brought by those components and those softwares, they can securely take on those projects with a low risk profile, making them successful along the way. What we saw over the years, and Brendan will be a great guest to talk about that, is those professionals that exist on manufacturing site that got successful with democratized industrial technology ended up building team to do more and more for the manufacturers they work with. And Brendan will talk with us today about those advanced manufacturing team, how you start them, what type of expertise you need, how do they propose business case to really drive the automation agenda of their company. So I'm quite excited to have that discussion. Going to the next one. Those advanced manufacturing team for us are very special. And in a sense, they work with integrators when they take on very unique, very complex process problems that deserve that external expertise. But we also see that the entry level, more and more, those team takes more on their own. And thank you to democratize industrial automation technology, it makes their life a little bit easier and faster. Without further ado, I want to introduce Brendan that's going to, be joining us today to talk about how those teams are taking shape and form and how they contribute to their companies as part of the manufacturing floor. So thanks for being with us, Brendan, today, and I'm quite excited about this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You are currently working for a very well-known integrator called Actemium. You guys do massive project globally, but in your previous life, you also work on the shop floor with manufacturers like Continental, like Toros. You've seen these problems from all angles. I would like to start this discussion perhaps by just telling us a little bit more about your own journey as a manufacturing professional and an automation professional.
Sure. So I was lucky to start out of school having nothing to do with my degree. I got a mechanical engineering degree and then immediately went into servos. And, I never thought that servos would be the basis of everything I ended up doing, but here we are. Played a little bit with the initial servos before the UR was really even a thing, and saw these weird prototypes on the desk come to life and become, I guess, such a building block of what everybody's doing. Moved on to bigger, better things, rubber processing, and obviously in the end, lawn equipment. And I would say as a whole, everybody's got a comfy spot, right? And that's kind of where folks like us end up coming in is pushing them out of that comfort zone to start introducing them to the new things they didn't think they were capable of.
So you started from the mechanical engineering angle and obviously acquire all that expertise afterward into
Yep.
motion control and robotics. Can
Yeah.
you can you tell us more about Actemium? Right now, you're working with this very global, this large system integrator, and to some extent, you've been able to see this industry from both sides. What are you doing exactly at Actemium, and what can you tell us about it?
So the power, I guess, of the Titan that Actemium is it gives the ability to not need to know everything. There are folks that are specialists in paint lines or ovens or different, higher level IT things in facilities. So big data or, ignition or SCADA. But where we live, they call them click clack processes. So the machine that picks something up, moves it over, gives it to another machine, passes it off to a robot, looks at it, like that's where our happy spot is. So within Actemium, we accept projects all over the place and kind of deploy the best resources and best team to solve that. Um, I've been to just recently. I've been to Idaho, Ohio, Virginia, Missouri, and it's all about, again, who needed the help that I was able to bring.
And it seems now you're working with a much wider variety of professional that has expertise versus perhaps what you've seen in the early days of your career, where it was you and a few others, but now you're covering much wider than the pure industrial automation control.
Correct, and that's kind of the power of the team. If I don't know what somebody else does, somebody else has already fought that battle, and they've got a good place to start from.
As we grow as automation professional, there's always projects that are more formative than others. Perhaps I would like to tell you if you can tell us about one of those projects where you felt you've developed quite a bit, you've learned quite a bit, perhaps in the earlier days of your career.
So one of the things that I keep in the back of my mind is that where I started out was probably the coolest place to have ended up, but I didn't appreciate it at the time. So we were making, like I said, servo motors, but there was no integrator present, right? The automated testers at the end of the line, the way the production process happened, that was 100% homegrown from the folks that knew how to do it. And I don't think that I've ever been in a situation like that since, where no matter how big the task was, people wanted to challenge it. And I would say that the most formative project there, I created a flow-through oven, and it was a silly little thing, but basically, previously we had a motor stator that needed to be cured. It had epoxy in it, needed to be hot for a while to let the epoxy cure. The current situation, we picked it up, threw it in a batch oven, closed the door, and poked it with a stick until it was cured. That was it. That was the entire actual process. Um, and we went out and bought a flow-through oven, so an oven with a conveyor built into it. And my job was to put the rest of the stuff into it. So how does it get from the fill station? How does it flow into the oven, flow out of the oven? How does it cool? And I can tell you right now, if I could do that again today, I would love to, because I I am not very sure that that thing is still alive, and it's because of the way that I solved it. Right, things like the Vention platform, and this was 2015, 2016, didn't exist. Right, but if I had those tools, I would have been off to the races, and that's what's kind
Perhaps
of
a good
crazy.
segue, Brendan, into one of our goal here is obviously to help small, medium manufacturers jumpstart their industrial automation journey. And you have the privilege of having seen small and also humongously big.
Yeah.
Perhaps what could you share for a small and medium business about jumpstarting their industrial automation journey?
Ooh, the toughest thing is that you can always stare at a problem and see this big grand solution. If we add this here and add this there, change this there, and the project, the scope just gets so big so quick. That's one of the hardest things as a small or a medium-sized manufacturer is understanding that maybe we do need to start small, start with a small victory, understand the technology, and then build upon that. I would say even in the super massive size, there's always going to be something when you look at the machine, it's on the floor, and everybody's agreed with it. You're at factory acceptance. They say, "Man, I wish it would have done that." But that's an add-on, right? That's not the core feature. So I think as you start out, set out a goal and actually complete the goal and then reassess. If you can be a little bit forward thinking on the machine that you designed so that maybe it can do this later, but not right now, that's a great start. But again, you don't have to solve everything all at once.
So start small is your advice, and I think Brendan is usually the advice we tell small manufacturers as well. Um, when we do those smaller project initially, one of the benefits we've observed on our end, and some of the people partaking in this project, and sometimes the operator himself end up being a bit upskilled as a result. I would love to hear if you've seen example of either operators started to be able to program a robot, or a maintenance technician that start to be able to drive some industrial automation project. Have you seen this upskilling taking place as small and medium manufacturers are taking on those easier industrial automation projects?
Oh, absolutely. I think your most valuable resource is your operator. They're the ones that can give you that laundry list, and it's not going to be clean, it's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be truthful, right? It doesn't do this, it needs to do that. I wish it could do this. If you are comfortable and capable of putting the power into those folks' hands, right? If you teach them how to make the changes that they want and respect the change process, right? We can't just make changes willy-nilly. But as you empower those folks, they're going to be more and more engaged. They're going to be the ones that end up coming up to you with more ideas and more projects. Say, hey, it does this. I noticed that's over there. It's exactly the same. Can I try that? Right? And that's how you get a group of folks that stops saying, yeah, that's not my job, and wants to be engaged in the process. One of the things I've always found is as you're putting a machine on the floor, everybody's coming to look, right? If they didn't care, they wouldn't come see it, right? If you engage them at that exact moment, right? We're all part of the same group, the same team, the same family. Invite them, show them what you're doing, explain why. People just want to know, right? It's not a secret. They're not getting replaced. They just want to be involved.
And for people on the line, and I know we're navigating those discussions sometimes with our own client, do you actually believe it's possible to take an operator and show them how to perhaps program a robot or a cobot these days. Do you think the technology is ready enough to see those success?
It absolutely is. And a lot of that is driven by the difference between an industrial robot and a collaborative one. Industrial still runs by the same protocols, the same rules, the same teach pendant that it's always been in many cases. And that is pretty rigid. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to make a mistake. But one thing that the collaborative robot manufacturers have really perfected is the concept of free drive, right?
Mhm.
I don't necessarily need to know how to move joint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can grab it by its face and put it to the point where I need it. And more often than not, that is an extremely useful tool in situations like welding or any sort of adhesive or application kind of things. It is really hard to finesse the way that certain things need to operate with an industrial robot, but man, can you just make it happen
That's where you get
with a
the
collaborative?
process knowledge of the operators to meet the robot to create magic to some extent at the intersection.
Oh yeah, and I would say the most important people, especially in welding, are the welders themselves, right?
Mhm.
They've
Absolutely.
welded this piece 500 times and they know how to do it because they've done it the wrong way and they're just trying to help. Let those guys get engaged.
So those thoughts are a great segue into building those advanced manufacturing team. And perhaps before we go into the specific of what role and how many we need, we can. I would love to hear your own definition around those teams whose mission is to drive automation. What do they do? How often are they engaged? Who do they talk to the organization? How close are they from the operation versus management? Would love to hear a little bit your own definition.
Well, I think advanced manufacturing team is it's always a bit of a double-edged sword. Uh, you have advanced manufacturing product people and advanced manufacturing process people. So your product people are the ones that really know why or how this product works. And giving the rubber industry as an example, I really do not care the chemical makeup of this tire. I don't. I don't know why, and I don't need to know why, but I know how to make it. And it's those process people um, that you need to lean on, right? That's your operators, that's your maintenance, that's your supervisors, that's the guy that's there at 3 in the morning fixing the weird thing that it did yesterday that you're not going to be able to see for another 75 days. Your advanced manufacturing team doesn't necessarily need to be the group with the fanciest titles or the most PhDs. They're the ones that really understand day to day what is going on and why. Um, and that even pulls in your controls engineers, your IT people. The way that machines work nowadays, absolutely everything is connected. So to say you've just got a bunch of, you know, um, electrical engineers in a room, that's not going to solve the problem anymore.
That's very well said. Where do you start? If you're a companies today that decide I'm going to be serious about automation, I want to start in a structured way. What's the starting point for them in terms of putting in place an advanced manufacturing team?
Oof. Well, if you know one thing about engineers, it's that we are really, really not necessarily good people, people managers. And you need somebody to kind of act as that guiding force. Again, you could put 100 engineers in a room and they're all going to go 100 directions. So having somebody to lead them, even if it's another engineer, just somebody, right, to set the pace and set the priority, set the project timeline, right? It's really easy to work to a deadline. It's really hard if we're just, you know, trying to get it done. After you've got that, you really need to understand who your customer is, right? And again, in terms of a big company, your customer for a GE appliances, whoever's putting a washer or dryer in their home, as the advanced manufacturing team, that's the people that are going to receive your machine. And if you make something bad and ugly, just like GE, you are going to get hate mail. So you need to get those guys involved from the beginning so that they can tell you where you're making a mistake before the mistake is made, right? It's way easier to fix stuff on CAD or paper than it is when it's on the floor, bolted to the floor, and just not acting right. So you have your managers and you have your day-to-day operators. you really do need to bring in maintenance. Maintenance is such an important thing because if you buy the wrong parts, there is a process. Everybody's got one to actually maintain spare parts. If you buy the coolest, weirdest thing out of Sweden, well, I mean, good luck. You might get one a year. And so now when the line goes down because that part's broken, you have no idea, but maintenance does.
Mhm.
So once we have our operators, our maintenance, and a manager, right, that's when we get the technical folks going in. And like I said, today everything is so connected. So it's not as easy as saying, "Oh yeah, this is Jim, our 20-year veteran. He's programmed PLCs his entire life." That's great, but in 20 years, it's changed. We've introduced vision, we've introduced AI, cloud computing, SCADA systems that don't actually require a connection to anything except the PLCs or what have you. The Vention system has a Python backend that you could create infinite numbers of crazy solutions, but that's not one guy anymore. That's got to be a few folks that can work collaboratively because if you put it on the shoulders of one person, your project's going to take 45 years.
It's interesting. The first thing you said about building those teams is basically involve the people already there, right? Start
Yes.
building that team, perhaps leveraging some of the process knowledge of the operator and bring an operator in and bring maintenance in. And, put them under a manager and then go get new expertise perhaps that you don't have in the team, but start with the folks within the plant already.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of Actemium's biggest I would guess say like their biggest requirement. Even if we have a project that's 1,000 miles away, there is no substitute for going to the place, going to Gemba and seeing the process, logging
Mhm.
it and understanding. Um, it doesn't matter if it's the same machine you've made a million times. You still need to go there. You still need to meet the people and understand the process. Yeah.
You started the discussion talking about the manager of that team and how it's a critical role to keep everybody aligned towards the mission.
hmm
I'm curious to, if you have one or two advice for that managers around how he interface with the own management of the plan, what would that be, Brendan?
So that depends on the nature of the manager. In industry, we tend to have folks that have climbed up the engineering ranks, right, and are very technical and can have nice technical conversations. But we also have those folks that are more what we'll call them corporate, right? You've got folks that don't really know the intricacies of what goes into automation, but they hired the right people
Mhm.
to do that. And so that's kind of where you've got this differentiator. You either trust the people that you've put together because you don't necessarily know all the details, or because you've come up through those ranks, you can kind of guide, maybe the less experienced folks into making the right set of decisions. So,
Have you
there's no
seen
one right
successes
answer.
with both type of profile?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say that what you'll see more often than not is the super technical guy is going to end up interjecting opinion, personal opinion, more often than not, which may or may not cause a little bit of friction where the trust, if it's properly established, actually feels really nice. Hey, my boss has got my back, but if I have issues, I can go to them and we can seek, outside sources of help.
Very good. Let me shift to the last portion of our discussion. Is one of the big mission of those team is to obviously drive the automation roadmap, create the proper business case, and give management option around what can be automated next, whether it's for labor shortage reason or safety reason. Um, I would love to start this discussion by if you're trying to build a business case, what advice would you have to what to look at to present that to management? What type of metric or KPI or would you like to include in to make sure you can have a constructive discussion with management of the plant about a given automation project?
That really depends. I would say that the hardest thing to make in the world is a one-off machine. Um, it's the weird machine in the corner that acts weird, and we want to replace it. It's going to act and do all of its own stuff. That's maybe if it's a small process, that's a nice thing to look for. But find something that's repeatable. Find something that's scalable. Like I said, start small So say you have 45 weld cells in your facility. Let's start with automating a weld process, not the whole thing, right? Not the giant lawnmower deck or the, digger bucket. That's a lot. But if you start with something simple, like here are some gussets, some brackets, some widget, right, that actually builds into the bigger whole, then you are, starting your understanding of the project, the process. You can scale it to other smaller cells, and then those smaller cells feed the big cell, right? Your win is in understanding the technology and the process.
What KPI or metric it was your most important one? Is it payback? Was it just sheer amount of investment? Was it, help us understand a little bit what was your winning metric when you're presenting that to management?
It was actually successful throughput. Um, so the best robot that I put on the floor in Toro, and if any of the guys ever see this, they'll agree, was a silly little robot on a table. I put a bunch of weld fixtures around it, and all it did all day long was basically weld in circles. Start on fixture 1, end on fixture 9. And that pulled 2 people out of that cell. Those 2 people went to maintain basically a similar cell, right? And so it wasn't necessarily that we replaced people. It wasn't necessarily that we upgraded people. It was just the fact that when I push go, I know it's done, and it tells me when it's done. So my KPI was actually a version of throughput, that's not technically a derivative of OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. It was more like process effectiveness. We know if we load this, push go, we can walk away for 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes is, a break or fixing another problem. That cell stopped being labor intensive for us, but it wasn't necessarily captured because people weren't, relocated. It was tricky.
So it was the ripple effect of that little problems that everybody was ignoring ended up basically became visible once the problem that nobody see was solved.
Correct. And then as you scale that, and again, welding is just such an easy one to pick at. If you weld a process, or if you weld a product using the wrong process, things tend to warp, right? Too much heat in metal makes wavy things. Everybody is going to have their own flavor, right? Nobody wears the same clothes every day. So that's not true with a robot. When you push go, it always executes the same program. You guarantee process repetition. And that was the other factor. There's no KPI to say I did it the same way over and over again. But that's probably the number one way to figure out if you've got quality issues on your oncoming or your incoming pieces and parts. Hey, we've welded this 100 times the right way. We got a new batch and everything's off. Let's go look at that, right, before we say that the robot's lost its mind. It's another, again, not a KPI, not a factor, but it's a real thing, that helps your business just by default.
In other words, I think what I hear from you here, Brandon, is yes, the payback and all that, they're important, but if you're able to show the ripple effect benefit beyond just the economic metric, you're more likely to have buy-in from management.
Yes.
Maybe my last question for today, Brendan. A lot of the clients that we work with don't always have the luxury to have a full-size advanced manufacturing team. And very often it starts with one engineer who's perhaps a little bit more motivated than the others and want to take on that extra challenge. By your laugh, I can suspect you were perhaps one of those engineers in your earlier career. What advice would you have for that engineers about here's how you discover automation opportunities and this is how you present it to management? What advice would you perhaps give to yourself 10 years ago as you were that very engineer?
I think the best advice is to ask questions and be so receptive to help. So Vention is a great partner, right? You have tons of electrical and mechanical guys that can help with your system. But say the system gets bigger, say you need some sort of weird niche safety thing, there are distributors for that. And
Mhm.
the distributor's job the whole time is to go into people's facilities and help them with problems. Those distributors have people on their teams, right? So while you as an individual contributor might be, the only guy in your facility, there are hundreds of distributors with more hundreds of engineers on their team who've seen it, who've solved it, and can assist and guide and help you, right? The biggest thing is that you're truly actually not alone, and it's not up to you to be the only one to solve the problem. You can ask for help, and I would say, crazy people like me, we just would love to jump into a challenge and help you solve it for nothing other than to say that we've solved it.
So it's think about the whole ecosystem that can help you in those projects, right? If you don't go in those projects alone, go get leverage all the knowledge that exists out there in the ecosystem.
Yep. Yeah. And very often, folks will make the rounds. There are local sales reps for absolutely everything. If it doesn't apply, still bring them over, have them stare at it, say, "Hey, I've got this plan. Can you help?" And I bet you're going to get 500 emails from it. We all are just so crazy passionate in this, neck of the woods.
That is true. This is one industry where there's a lot of passionate people. Brendan, that was a fantastic discussion. Thank you for discussing with us on all those topics. I think with that, I'll give the microphone back to Jeremy for the Q&A portion.
Amazing. That was honestly a very insightful conversation between two of you. Even though I've worked with Etienne for 4 years, I still learned some stuff today. So right now we will be opening up the Q&A portion of this webinar, and hopefully we do have some time to go through all of the questions. If we don't, we will try to answer them afterwards. The webinar will be available on demand, and you will receive an email with the link to watch it in the next 24 hours. So like I said, I will be opening up the floor to the Q&A period, and let's announce this over here. So if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask them. And with that, I see we do have a few questions already waiting, so I will change the view over here, this, and change setup, and ask a few questions that we have. The first one, Brandon, I believe is for you. So Brandon, can you talk about one project that you have successfully completed with your advanced manufacturing team in the past?
Yeah. So one really fun one that we had, this would be way in the beginning, was an AGV application, and it sounds really really simple, but it ended up being a major success. So we had a need to move product from one side of the facility to the other. Sure, no problem. But how do you do that, right? You have an AGV, but how do you teach it? Where does it go? And then how does it carry things? And how heavy can those things be? And where it can drop off and pick up points be so that they're not in the way. And that's kind of the beginning of what an advanced manufacturing team is. Me, sure, yeah, I'll put an AGV. It can go from point A to point B. Is that useful? I don't know, right? Who actually needs it and why? So that team ended up being made up of the machinists who are completing the parts, the assemblers that were in the assembly area, the logistics people internally, to say, okay, well, we'll free up this space. This will be, AGV parking or charging or whatever. And it actually ended up being IT as well. We learned that the hub for that AGV was right next to a main conference center. And when they had their big meetings, everybody jumped on the Wi-Fi, and guess what happened? The AGVs jumped off. So that's kind of where I'm saying you have no idea, right, how big everything becomes until you run into this one issue and you're like, I can't explain why the AGVs turned off. They can't see anything. I don't know what's going on. Help. And as soon as we saw that, we learned what to do for the next time. It was, okay, we got to move this. This has got to be over here. And maybe we don't put an IT hub right next to, the giant conference center. But it was a great success, and it was the only way that product moved. We eliminated forklifts from that entire process.
That's honestly a fun little story, especially with the Wi-Fi. So we have two questions for all answer, or I'll ask the first one. This one I'll still target towards you, Brendan, first. Etienne, you might have some information as well. But the question here is, how do you go about getting executive buy-in before starting a new automation project?
Oh, well, the hardest thing is visuals, right? As folks tend to move up the ladder, they become less and less technical because you have to, right? So the more simplistic you can make your plans, the better, right? Obviously, numbers make people happy. Hey, give me $500,000 and I'll give you back 6. That makes people happy. but you can't just put that on a one-page piece of paper in big font and get money, right? You need to explain why and what and how, and creating visuals and a process and a plan is probably the biggest bit of it, right? How are we going to solve it, and what's the risk? Have we done it before? Do we know friends that can help us? How, like I said, can we deploy it anywhere else, or is this going to be a weird one-off, and when we finish it, and it's not really going to go anywhere.
I'll add to that, Brendan, from our own experience. If the executive is technical, to Brendan's point, we'll talk about how the solution removes technology risk. If the executive is a business minded, I'll talk about how this initiative remove economic risk, right? And that define a spectrums of talk track that we can have and ways to present information to secure the buy-in. Usually the more close to the problems you're working with engineers, we'll problem solve with them. We'll look at solution with them. We'll test various components, but the level of uncertainty that an engineers can navigate on the technical front is quite high. When you're up at the executive level, you don't want to bring any technical uncertainty anymore. You want to make sure that the technical uncertainty has been removed and that the only thing is left is why the initiative would remove economic risk for the business. So there's a spectrum of those things in between, but they're different tools, different ways to communicate about the same project.
Amazing answers from both of you. We have one last question. Hopefully, I think we only have about a minute left. I think Brandon, again, maybe a bit more targeted towards you, is what are the technologies you and your team use every day that you could not live without?
Oh boy. Well, I think by default I have to say a computer. Kind of starts there. Um, there's definitely a tiny flathead screwdriver. That's the only tool that matters in the world. Um, and I would honestly say the internet, right? I am obviously not the oldest engineer here, but I've gotten where I've gotten because I can aggressively Google. The one thing they always told us growing up in school is, well, you're not going to have a calculator wherever you go. Yeah, you do. That's your phone. And companies are they're making it even easier, right? You can scan certain products and get its entire data sheet right there. You have a problem, you can pull up a manual on your phone, right? The most important thing, like I've said over and over, is just ask, right? Don't assume somebody's posted it. It could be a forum, it could be their actual, the manufacturer's website. Like the biggest thing you can do is just have access to ask how and why.
Amazing. Honestly, it's I like the calculator analogy. But that's actually it for the questions and actually it for the time that we have for today as well. I want to thank both of you, Etienne and Brandon, as well as everyone that took time out of their day to participate in today's webinar. Again, we will be sending out the link to the on-demand recording. Thank you very much and have a great day.